Ray in the back. Ray. Wait for your microphone.
Hello, my name is Ray McGovern. I was a CIA analyst for 27 years, and I'm co-founder of Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. I'm detecting a kind of aura of unreality here. Things are being treated as flat fact, which are totally unproven. It reminds me of weapons of mass destruction. When the forerunner of James Clapper told his British counterpart on 20 July 2002 that there were no weapons of mass destruction, that the intelligence was being fixed around the policy, the New York Times, 9 days later, had an article in which 7 times weapons of mass destruction were mentioned as flat fact. And so it is here with the Russian hack. I hate to disappoint all of you. You nourished on the New York Times as I used to be. I grew up here in this city. But there was no hack, okay? It was a leak. Now, how do I know it was a leak? Because among our retired experts is the former technical director of the NSA. He devised these collection programs. And with the help of Ed Snowden, he can explain exactly how they work. And he says if NSA had detected a leak, they would know it. Now, what's my question? My question is this. There are all kinds of hints out there that have not been pursued. There's an ambassador in London named Craig Murray. He says he knows who the source was. He says he's been in touch with people in touch with the source. And when I asked him, he's a friend of mine, has the New York Times or the Washington Post been in touch with you? He said, no. I asked 2 days later. I said, well, they have these big reports here. They're teaching it as flat fact that it was a hack and not a leak. He says they still haven't gotten in touch with me. So twofold question here. Number one, why has the New York Times, and I direct this to David, why have you not checked with a former British ambassador who claims to have met with the leaker, not the hacker? The second part of the question is, why do you still, after the experience of 14 years ago, why do you still do stenography on what secret, anonymous government sources, including James Clapper, who perjured himself before the Senate, what they tell you? It's not proven, it's treated as flat fact, and it ain't.
Let me ask I want to add to that a question that sort of, does it matter whether it was a leak or a hack? Because there's been an awful lot of talk about what really mattered here was the weaponization of information. And so just, if you want to.
Well, I'll take Ray's first part of this. We've devoted a huge amount of effort to this, and I think the Times made its share of errors during the WMD time, and we also had our share of extremely skeptical stories during the WMD time. But the main lesson that we learned was that we were unable, before the war broke out, to go find the dissenters within the system, and we didn't put enough and we didn't put enough effort to find the dissenters who were, as we learned later, in energy and then the State Department intelligence arena. In this case, we put a fair bit of energy into that, and it's an extraordinarily different kind of case and investigation than Iraq WMD has been. And I think that the president-elect has been right to remind everybody that the CIA and other intelligence agencies made a big mistake during WMD time and that it had disastrous consequences. I could add, and I'm sure you could add, given your background, 15 other bad calls by intelligence agencies. In this particular case, we had the advantage that we could go to some of the victims and figure out what happened to them. So start with John Podesta, who had a Gmail account in which you've now read a lot of the material. We know exactly who had authorized access to that Gmail account. It was a very small group. We have found the piece of code from and published it. And you can go look it up in the Perfect Weapon story that came in a fake email to him. He remembers the moment, as does his tech advisor, when he pressed the button on this fake email. And we have now seen how that gave an outsider access to his account. And it's fairly similar to the story you'll see at the DNC and elsewhere. So in the Podesta case, if there was a leaker, the only leaker could be Podesta and anybody else who had authorized access to his account.
No, right.
Podesta was one of
You
the
have your
key
question,
parts
other
of
people
this.
have
There were
questions.
two main leaks
It's not
out
a
here.
debate.
There was the DNC, and there were the Podesta emails. And of those two, to tell you the truth, I think the Podesta emails were probably the far more important out of that grouping.
More questions? Over here. Wait for the microphone.